Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope that you're well. Today is Wednesday. It's December 23rd. We're getting ready for Parshas Vayigash, and I have some sources on the Parsha that I'm excited to share with you today. So let's begin. In Parshas Vayigash, we finally have the great reveal, where Yosef finally reveals himself to his brothers. They've been coming down to Mitzrayim to purchase food for their families that are suffering during the famine that's ravaging the region. And Yosef has not let himself be known that he's Yosef. And he's, so to say, been toying with them to try to see, have they really had a change of heart before he reveals himself as being Yosef? He needs to make certain that they're going to be b'shalom, they'll be in peace with one another, because it's not going to do anyone any good to tell everyone he's Yosef and let's all get back together if they're going to be just as mad at each other once again. So after this has all been accomplished, he reveals himself to the brothers and he tells them, I harbor no ill will. I'm not upset at you. This was clearly God's plan, that he wanted me down here in Mitzrayim so I could be in a position where I would be able to provide for everybody, and including my family, all of you and your families back in Canaan. And I have no hard feelings towards you. He then tells them, go back, it's important, go back and tell our father, tell Yaakov, you've got to pack up your families, and you've all got to come down to Mitzrayim, and here I'll be able to take care of you because there's another 5 years of famine ahead. So let's see 3 psukim that talk about this. So we're in Perek Mem Hey, that's chapter 45, and let's see these 3 psukim, Tes through Yud Aleph, 9 through 11. So this is Yosef speaking to the brothers. He says, Maharu, you have to hurry. Va'alu alavi, go up, go back to Canaan, go up to my father. Ve'amartem I love, and I need you to say to him, Ko amar bincha Yosef, so says your son Yosef. Samani Elokim la'adon l'chol Mitzrayim. God has made me in charge. He's put me in a position of authority over all of Egypt. Ridai lai al tamod. Come down to me. Do not. They say tarry. That's a very fancy word. Don't hesitate. You've got to come down, pack up, throw everything in the car, in the minivan, and come down now. Yud, 10. V'yashavta beretz Goshen. You'll dwell in the land of Goshen. V'yisa karov elai. And that'll be close by me. You won't be exactly in the Egyptian capital. I know you need your own space. For Am Yisrael, they still have to forge their identity and remain somewhat separate. So you'll be close by, but in your own area. Everybody, you, your children, the grandchildren, the whole kid and caboodle. All of your animals, all your flocks, everything that you've got, bring it down to Mitzrayim. Yud Aleph, 11. I will sustain you. I will take care of you. I'll provide for you, Sham, once you're here. Because I'm telling you, there's another 5 years of famine ahead. You can't keep doing this about sending people down to buy food and bring it back to Canaan. You got 5 years more of this coming. You've got to come down. Penti varesh, and I've got that bolded. Penti varesh. The key to succeeding is you've got to come down to Mitzrayim. Penti varesh, lest you become impoverished. If you don't do this, if you don't come down and move the whole family to Mitzrayim, you're going to all go broke, and you might starve in this famine. You, your household, everything that you have. So the key to surviving the famine is packing up and coming down to Mitzrayim. The Ramban, Nachmanides here, is bothered by something, which never really struck me before. And this is as follows. Penti varesh, so this is a couple sentences into the Ramban we're going to pick up, and that's where I've got it started here. Va'amar, Yosef tells him, the message to send to Yaakov is as follows. She'im tisakev be'eretz Canaan tivaresh. If you choose to stay, to delay in the land of Canaan, you're going to become impoverished. It's going to all fall apart. And look what he says here. Ki ani lo uchal l'shloach lecha le'eretz Canaan lechem rav miginzei melech. I'm not going to be able to send supplies, to send food for you back to Canaan. In other words, the Ramban's bothered by the following question. Yosef says to the brothers, tell dad, the only way you're going to pull through these next 5 years is if you all pack up and move down to Mitzrayim. Well, isn't there a second way? Yosef's in a position of authority. He could send care packages. He can continuously send stuff back to Canaan. Why is Yosef sending the message saying the only way you're going to pull through is if you all pack your bags and come down to Mitzrayim? Here I can take care of you. Yosef was such a power broker. Why couldn't he tell everyone, stay in Canaan and I'll ship? I'll export stuff. The same way you always see images and pictures coming out from around the world, food packages generously donated by the United States of America to starving regions of the world, massive sacks of grains and rice and whatnot. So why couldn't Yosef do that? Massive sacks of stuff getting sent to Canaan, to the family. Why does he tell them the only way you're going to survive and not become impoverished is if you come down here? Why couldn't they send
to fulfill the prophecy
stuff to them? Again, but he's sending this message. He says, Penti Varesh, the only way that you will survive is if you stay there. He's not saying anything about prophecies. The pasuk, the words in the pasuk says.
No, but it would fulfill the prophecy for them to come to Egypt and be in a land that they're not supposed to be.
But we're looking at the pasuk and what the pasuk says. The verse says, Yosef's words to the family is as follows. He tells them, you have to pack up and come down here. If you stay back home, Penti Varesh, you will become impoverished, which implies I do not have the option of sending food back to you. And the only way that you can survive this famine is to pack up and come down to Egypt. That clearly implies that he did not have the other option. And that's what the Ramban is wants to understand. Why is that? Why was it not an option? You're suggesting your own reason, but that's, again, not what the verse is saying, not what the pasuk is saying. The pasuk says, Yosef tells the family, you have to come down here if you want to survive this famine. If you remain in Canaan, you will become impoverished. I won't be able to take care of you. And the Ramban wants to know why. Why couldn't he send packages back to Canaan? So let's see what the Ramban says. Va'amar, Yosef says, She'im tisakeh baretz, if you choose to delay and stay in the land of Canaan, baretz Canaan tivaresh, you will become impoverished. Ki ani lo uchal lishloach lechal eretz Canaan, lechem rav miginzei hamelech. I am not able, despite the position of power I am in, I am unable to send food, great amounts of food to you back in Canaan. Ki yichashdu osi, if I do that, they will suspect me, sha'ani mochrosham. Why am I sending these massive wagon loads of food to Canaan? It must be I'm skimming something off the surface and I'm opening some business. I've got some deals going on in Canaan. Shani mochrosham, I'm selling it there. Lasos li sham otzros kesef. I'm trying to create my offshore accounts. I got my accounts in the Cayman Islands. I got my accounts in Canaan. They're going to all assume, why am I sending so much stuff? I'm doing some black market dealing. And I'm selling stuff up there so I can create otzros kesef, storehouses of silver in Canaan. Ultimately, what's my goal? V'lashuv el artzi v'lo moladati. Because they all know that's where I'm from, and they want me, and they would suspect I'm sending all that stuff there because I'm opening some discount storehouse, warehouse up there where I'm going to sell the stuff in the black market, make a lot of money. I'm going to set up my accounts there. So ultimately, I'll return to Canaan. But if so, I can't do that. That's not an option. I cannot send food outside of Canaan, outside of Mitzrayim. I cannot do that. However, if you want to survive, the one option that's open is come down here. Here I can take care of you. No one's going to suspect me of being up to no good. But if you choose to come here down to Mitzrayim, everyone will see that you are clearly my family. You're my father. You're my brothers. The king will certainly give me permission to sustain you. So Yosef is telling them, and according to the Ramban, he's saying the only way I'll be able to provide for you, even though I'm in this incredible position of power, the only way I'll be able to provide for you is if you come down here. If I start sending stuff, shipping goods back up to Canaan, everyone's going to suspect that I'm up to no good, that I'm pulling some shtick, I'm doing something that's fishy. And in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, I can't do that. The only way I can help you is if you all come down to Mitzrayim. That's what the message Yosef sends. It's a fascinating Ramban, and I never really stopped to think about that. If you had asked me before seeing this Ramban, why did Yosef tell them to come to Mitzrayim? So I would have said, similar to what Shira's saying, I would have said that Yosef understood that this is the Ramban's approach to the whole story of Yosef, that the dreams that he had were somewhat of a prophecy, and it was his job to fulfill those prophecies. So they all got to come down there. So far, everyone came down. The only one who has not is Yaakov. But what I would then say to that is, okay, they fulfilled the prophecy. Now let them go back. Why does he have to take care of them? So now you'll say, because God's other prophecy of that they've got to be strangers in a strange land, that's not Yosef's job to fulfill that. It's not his job. God's got many ways he could take care of that. And this Ramban's saying, why did Yosef insist you've got to come down? Because I want you to survive the next 5 years. And the only way I can make sure that happens is if you come down to Mitzrayim. That's what this Ramban is saying. Fascinating Ramban. I want to share with you something that we've been using some of his commentary a lot lately, and I love it. I'm enjoying it so much. Rav Simcha Zissel. Rav Simcha, I also love his name. Rav Simcha Zissel Brody, who was a Rosh Yeshiva in the Hebron Yeshiva for over 40 years. As we've said many times, he was in the yeshiva at the same time that Memphis' own Dave Shainberg, who was murdered during the 1929 Hebron massacre. He was there during that period, and he was not in Hebron at the time. That's why Reb Simcha Zissel survived. But at the same token, he stayed with the yeshiva, and he ended up being one of its heads for over 40 years. So he has a beautiful set of svarim that Layla treated me to the other year, and we've been enjoying it very much. It really focuses a lot on the Ramban. Reb Simcha Zissel had a love for the Ramban, and a lot of it focuses on the Ramban. And here I looked and I saw he has a beautiful little piece on this Ramban. So let's see. Reb Simcha Zissel on page 2. Maru v'alu alavi. So he tells the brothers, quickly go up to my father, v'amartem elav, and say to dad, Ko amar bincha Yosef, so says your son Yosef, rida alai. I need you to quickly come down here. Al tamod, don't hesitate at all. V'yashavta be'eretz Goshen, I want you to settle in the land of Goshen, chilkalti yoschasham, and I'll take care of you in Goshen, but I cannot take care of you if you stay in Canaan. So he says here in the Rav Simcha Zissel, Nishelas hashayla, the obvious question needs to be asked, Madua bikesh shvam she'yavo leMitzrayim v'sham yazun v'farsim. Why does Yosef got to make everyone schlep, pick up the families, pack up the bags, pack up the house, and move down to Egypt, and only here I'll take care of you? Yosef, in his position of power, what? He couldn't send them food from Egypt back to Canaan? He couldn't have seen to it that they could have stayed home, not go through the hassle of packing up a home and a house. It's such a hard thing to do. Why did he? Why do they all got to schlep down to Egypt? No one wants to be there. So no, why couldn't Yosef ship them food? So he says, hey, Shival Kacha Ramban. This is exactly what's bothering the Ramban. And the Ramban answers it with Varav, and he says, he's quoting our Ramban now, Vamar Pentivaresh Osavescha, that he says to him that if you stay in Israel, stay in Canaan rather, you and your family will become impoverished. In Tisaki Beretz Canaan, if you choose to stay there, Tivaresh, you'll become impoverished. I cannot send massive amount of food from Egypt back to Canaan. They'll suspect me that I'm selling it there in my black market in order to build up storehouses of silver, because my ultimate goal is to return to my birthplace. However, but if you all choose to come down to Egypt, and now everyone will realize you're my father, you're my brothers, the king, Paro, will let me sustain you. So let's see what Rav Simcha Zissel does with this Ramban. He says in the next paragraph, in this incident, it is revealed to us, Tohar Nafsho Shel Yosef. Look at the pure and noble spirit of Yosef, B'chol Shleimuso, in all of its fullness. Kedai hayalo. Yosef says it is kedai, it is worthwhile, lahatriach esaviv, to put my father, my beloved father, through a massive hassle. Hazaken, and Yaakov was very elderly at this age. And also put the whole family, all his brothers, their wives, the little kids, through the massive hassle of packing up, closing up their homes in Canaan and traveling down to Egypt. That's a big deal. The Hakol, why did he do this? Kedei shelo yechashdubo. He didn't want the Egyptians to be suspicious of him. Shu mavriach es hamazon livnei mishpachto, that he's in a bogus way, he's sending food back to his family, kedei lemochro, in order to sell it on the black market, and to seize for himself the profits. So look at Yosef. He's such a tzaddik, this Yosef. what is he says it is worth it to put the whole family through this massive hassle so as not to raise the suspicions of everyone that I'm a no goodnik and I'm up to some kind of shenanigans, financial shenanigans. That's how important it is to be on the straight and narrow, the Rav Simcha Zissel is saying. Is that the Ramban says, why did Yosef do this? I can't have them suspect me. The Chilul Hashem that this will create. If they suspect that here I am and I'm playing these monetary shenanigans, I cannot do that. Therefore, it's kedai, it's worthwhile for the whole family to go through this massive hassle so nobody should suspect that we're pulling shtick. Let's continue. And what did he do? He promises his father and brother, lo kesef v'zahav. He didn't promise them that I'm going to give you silver, I'm going to give you gold. V'lo begadim u'matanos. He didn't say I'm going to provide you with all sorts of fancy clothes and gifts. Elamazon v'kilkalam minimaliyim. All Yosef was promising his family was minimal, essential goods in order to survive the next 5 years. Hamaspikim l'kiyumam, that will be enough to enable them to survive. V'gam bezeh, even though he's not sending them luxurious items, he's not sending them grade A stuff. He's sending them bare bones and basics. I'm going to send you wheat. I'll send you rice, whatever it is. He says, no, even with this, I can't have anybody raising any suspicions that we are playing monetary shtick and that we're playing games. That would be such a chilul Hashem. Yosef was so nervous, I don't want anyone to suspect that we're pulling any games, we're up to any shenanigans. I'm just going to take a drink. In order to make sure and to remove this small suspicion that people might have, it was worth it to ask of everyone and to require of everyone that they have to pack up their homes, sell all their stuff, pack it all up, and come down to Egypt, and not rather than send food back to their homes. So you see here, Rav Simcha Zissel is teaching us how important it is not even to give the appearance that we're up to shenanigans, that we're up to any kind of financial misdeeds. How important it is to be absolutely honest and upright in all of our dealings with people. And I want to show you something because this jogged my memory. It's not just here and in this one Ramban that Rav Simcha Zissel is pointing out that you see this, but the Ramban makes this point a little bit later towards the towards the end of this parsha. In Perek Mem Zayin, towards the end of this parsha, when it's telling us about how successful Yosef was in his campaign to gather up all of the resources that Mitzrayim had amassed during the years of plenty. And then when people ran out of their own foods, they needed to come buy more. So they basically were bringing all their money to the king's treasury to buy food. And people from the region were coming in. So basically, Yosef amassed an incredible amount of money for the Egyptian treasury. So look at this pasuk. It's chapter 47. That's Perek Mem Zayin. It's pasuk Yudalet. Vayalaket Yosef es kol hakesef hanimtza be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yosef collected all the monies that was found in the entire land of Egypt. In order because everyone had to come buy food, this king basically seized everyone's assets. But Uveretz Canaan, and all the money in Canaan, because people from Canaan were coming for food. Bashever Hashem Heim Shovrim. And how did he get all of these funds? This was for all of the food, the grains that they were buying. And then the pasuk emphasizes what I have it in bold, Vayaveh Yosef es hakesef beis Paro. What happened to all this money that Yosef collected? Every last dime, every penny of it was brought to the house of Paro, meaning to the treasury. And look what the Ramban emphasizes there, bottom of page 2. Vayalaket Yosef es kol hakesef. So Ramban's bothered by that. Seems to be extra. What does that mean? And Yosef, all the money came in. Oh yeah, and Yosef brought it to the treasury. What's that pointing out? So look at the Ramban. Siper HaKosov is that. Why does the pasuk throw in those last several words that Yosef brought all the money to the treasury? The Gemara Inyan, it chooses those words to close the story. B'chol haparsha lohodia ma'alos Yosef, to let us know the noble character, what kind of a great person Yosef was. B'chachma, in terms of wisdom, b'tfuna, in his understanding, v'das, his intellect. V'chi haya ish emunim, not only was he a genius, but he was so trustworthy. She'evi kol hakesef beis Paro. The pasuk is telling us he brought every last cent to the treasury. Lo asal atzmo otros kesef, and he didn't make for himself. It's so prevalent in all these banana republics and all of these corrupt, tyrannical dictatorships that everybody is skimming something off the top and enriching themselves in the process. And the pasuk is saying Yosef did not do that. Lo asal atzmo otros kesef. He did not make for himself any storehouses of silver, matmone mistarim, any kind of secret treasure, stash. Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt, or l'sholchan l'eretz Canaan, or to send stuff back to Canaan, meaning like an offshore account. Avol nasan lamelech haboteach bo kol hakesef. The pasuk is emphasizing that Yosef was in charge of this massive project, and every cent that came through Yosef's hands was accounted for. He was the original Jewish accountant, Yosef. He was able to account for every last dime, and he brought it all to Paro. And because of this, v'kano lo es ha'adama Gama Gufos. Because of this, he pulled off an incredible coup for Paro. Paro ended up acquiring all the land in Egypt because all the landowners had to sell their land in order to buy food. And then when they ran out of food, they had nothing else to sell. The pasuk tells us they sold themselves into indentured servitude to Paro. So then, in a sense, Paro acquired everyone, all the land, all the property, and all the people of Egypt. And through this incredible honesty that Yosef acted with, what happened? He was able to find favor in the eyes of the people. In other words, even though Yosef was the conduit, the one who was responsible for so many people, you might say, losing their shirts, and you might think that they hate Yosef. But no, he found favor in their eyes. Why? Because first of all, they granted it was his ideas that allowed them to survive, but also they saw how honest he was. He did not enrich himself. Had he enriched himself, they would have hated him. Right? They probably would have lynched him. But they saw it was so clear that, and he kept an account that every penny, every dime that came through his hand was accounted for and brought to Paro. And through this, he found favor in everyone's eyes. Because ultimately, God makes certain that those who fear God are matzliach, will succeed. So if we ever find ourselves in a situation of challenge, of temptation, where we're thinking, let me skim some off the top, I need to get by. We have to remember, Hashem hu matzliach es yirayav. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is God Almighty who allows those who fear Him to succeed. So if we prove to God, if we show Hashem that I'm an ish emunim, I'm a trustworthy person, I act with honesty and integrity, I'm upright, like Yosef was, Hashem will allow us to succeed and He will bless us with success. We should never think that I have to cheat in order to succeed. That's a terrible mindset and it's wrong. We have to remember God is the source of success and He will allow Yirayav, those who fear Him, those who are honest, those who do not make a chil Hashem. To the contrary, we sanctify God's name. God will see to it that we succeed. I thought this is awesome because what we see about Yosef, we always refer to Yosef as Yosef HaTzadik. And we say, why is he Yosef HaTzadik? Because he resisted temptation. If you ask me, what temptation did Yosef resist? I'll always answer, and I think everyone would answer, the Eshes Potiphar. He had this woman who was throwing herself at him to seduce him, to have this affair. And he held strong. He did not give in to temptation. And that's why he's a tzaddik, 100%. But there were other temptations Yosef had. And they went on much longer than that one temptation of Eshes Potiphar. He had the temptation to enrich himself. The money that was coming through his hands, it was absolutely phenomenal. You speak to people and you read accounts of people who got caught up with financial scandals. And unfortunately, so many times it's governmental related. When there's a grant going on, when there's a government grant going on, it could be Medicare, Medicaid, and they say there's so much money passing through their hands. It is such a temptation to do something, to fudge the numbers, to botch things and to skim. It is such a temptation. The money's being thrown at them. And this was going on in Yosef's case for years, all the years of plenty when they were amassing everything, and then the years of famine when everyone's coming and selling everything they own. All that money passing through his hands, and the pasuk, the verse is testifying about him. Vayoveh Yosef es hakesef beis Paro. Yosef brought every last cent to the Egyptian treasury. And now we see another reason why he's called Yosef HaTzadik. Because yes, he resisted temptation, but not just the temptation of Eshes Potiphar. He resisted the temptation to enrich himself, which was going on for years. And you might say that as strong as the passion is for for znus, for promiscuity, okay, but that was a limited period of time. Here was the passion and the temptation to enrich himself with funds, ill-gotten gains, and he resisted, I think it's just as worthy in being called a tzaddik for that. And we know in Pirkei Avos, we say, Ezu Gibor, who's really considered strong and mighty? Hakovesh es Yitzro, someone who's able to subdue their evil inclination. And Yosef's the paradigm. He's the epitome of this. He subdued his inclination when it came to sinning with Eshes Potiphar, and also he subdued that inclination when it came to taking ill-gotten gains. And he should really be a role model for every single one of us, because sooner or later we find ourselves in a position where we're being tempted to take that which is not ours. And we have to remember, like that Ramban ended, Ki Hashem hu matzliach es yireav. Ultimately, it's God who decides who's going to succeed, and God blesses his yireav. Those who fear God and those who walk upright with him, God blesses them with success. I want to share with you, this jogged my memory, a beautiful incident. There was an art scroll book that was written in 1993 that I thought was excellent. I know a lot of times some of the books about some of our rabbinic luminaries sometimes get a bad rap, because some say, they're just all praiseworthy. They just start off, it's the same script. When they were born, they were a genius. And then, by the time they were 7, they knew all of Chumash by heart. By the time they were 9, they were making a Siyam Hashas. And, there's stories like that are out there, and they get a lot of bad rap. This book in particular about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, I thought was excellent, because first of all, it painted a very, very vivid picture of what Jewish life was like in Eastern Europe. I'd say, going into the 20th century, earlier than the 20th century, certainly going into the 20th century, but specifically those early years of the 20th century, going up to World War I, and those interwar years also in there. Really, really excellent book. It's a treasure chest of material about life in Eastern Europe, but also about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who played a key role in transmitting much of the Torah from Eastern Europe, from the great Lithuanian yeshivas. He was a prized student of the Slobodka yeshiva, bringing it to America. He first was he was a pulpit rabbi in Canada for years before he came to America to be one of the Roshei Yeshiva and Torah Vodaas in Brooklyn. But he was also very instrumental in guiding the Orthodox Jewish community in America in the post-World War II years. I want to share with you a story that I remember. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was renowned. There are so many stories about him, about his integrity and his honesty, and how often he spoke about how important it was to be honest. And I remember this, and I said, I got to find the story, and I found it. So it's on pages 107 and 108 in the book. Here's the story. Rabbi Yaakov, the first job he had after getting his smicha, before he came to Toronto, the first job he had, by the way, before Toronto, he was in Seattle for a number of months, Seattle, Washington. There was a rabbi who I believe was on a sabbatical, and he filled in for several months before going to Toronto, and then his family joined him in Toronto. So, but his first position as a rabbi was in a small town in Lithuania called Citevian. I don't know where that is in Lithuania. We could find it on a map, but that's what it's called, Citevian. Probably not much has changed in that town from when Rabbi Yaakov was there to now. But let's see. No doubt the most famous incident involving Rabbi Yaakov in Citevian was one in which he felt was a mitzvah to publicize. Involved the local postmaster. Shortly after he assumed the position as Rav, a Jew came to Rav Yaakov and told him that the postmaster had mistakenly given him change for 100 lit note, that was the currency, instead of the 10 lit note he had given him. Rabbi Yaakov advised the man to return the money. In other words, the guy came asking Rabbi Yaakov, what should I do? The postmaster made a mistake, huge mistake, right? It was 10 times, he gave him change for a bill 10 times of what he had given him. So Rabbi Yaakov said, go return the money. Several weeks later, Rabbi Yaakov was in the post office, and this time the postmaster gave him more stamps than he had paid for. The smile on the postmaster's face as he handed Rabbi Yaakov his stamps alerted him that the postmaster was deliberately testing him to see whether the other Jew had just been an honest fool or had been acting according to the dictates of the new Rav. Rabbi Yaakov was delighted that he had been presented with such an opportunity for Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of the divine name, and instantly returned the extra stamps. Years later, he learned from survivors of Citevian that the postmaster had been one of the few locals who had been willing to hide Jews in his cellar. That's during the Holocaust when the Nazis invaded. And he was convinced that such displays of honesty had been a major factor in that decision. So Rabbi Yaakov was convinced that the honesty that he and the Jews in the town had shown to the postmaster played a huge role in helping him formulate his opinion of what did he think of the Jewish populace, and he was of the opinion that this saved lives, that there were Jews who were saved from the onslaught of the Nazis when they invaded Lithuania, and he was absolutely convinced that the reason why the postmaster played a role in that town of harboring Jews and saving their lives had to do with the Kiddush Hashem, with the sanctification of God's name that they made by displaying their honesty. So again, that brings us back to that Ramban, Ki Hashem hu hamatzliach es yireyav, and that's something that we all have to remember. I want to share with you, go on a different leg, something else that goes on towards the end of the Parsha, which is, towards this same part of the Parsha, which I found fascinating. One of these sources I hadn't seen prior to this year. One I found them both fascinating. So we started in chapter 45, Memhe, when Yosef is telling his brothers, go back to dad up in Canaan and tell him to pack up and come down here. Another piece of the instructions that Yosef gave his brothers was as follows in Pasuk Chavdalad 24. Yosef says, Vaishalach es achav, he sends his brothers Vayelechu, and they went. Vayomer aleim, and his last words to them were, Al tirgizu baderach, don't quarrel on the way. I don't want you guys fighting on the way. So what does that mean? What was Yosef worried about that he tells the brothers, Al tirgizu baderach, I don't want you quarreling on the way. So Rashi quotes a couple of pshatim. Rashi first says, a pshat that is not the simple approach, but then he tells us the simple approach. Let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says, Al tisasku bidvar halacha. What does it mean, don't quarrel? He means, Al tisasku bidvar halacha. Don't get engaged in a halachic discussion. Shelo tirgaz aleichem haderach. So the road doesn't cause you to stray. So what he's saying is as follows. Very often people get very, very involved in their learning. And you see this with someone, they get engrossed in a conversation and in-depth study, they suddenly aren't aware of their surroundings as much, and they could get confused. So he's telling the brothers, according to this, this is not the straightforward way to understand it, but according to this pshat, right, of Rashi, that Yosef is telling the brothers, don't learn in such in-depth on the way, because if you do that, you're going to miss the turnoff. You'll miss the roads that you need to take. It's not good for traveling. So, okay, talk and learning if you want. You want to discuss Torah topics, fine, but don't get so in-depth because that'll pose a potential risk in the course of your travel. We'll get back to that. Lefi pshuto, but what's the simple reading of what Yosef told them? Lefi pshuto shel mikra, the simplest way to read the text is, yesh lomar, that what does it mean? Lefi shahayu nichlamim. After Yosef revealed himself, the brothers were absolutely ashamed of themselves. Because now it all comes crashing down on him. That 22 years earlier, we threw that kid into the pit, and then we sold him to the passing band of Ishmaelim, the Ishmaelites. Hayadoeg, so Yosef was worried. Shema yarivu baderach. What does it mean, al tirgazu baderach? Don't quarrel. He's telling them, I don't want you guys starting to fight. I know on your way back, you're all going to be sniping at each other, whose fault this was, and who was really responsible for my having been sold. Shema yarivu baderach. I don't want you fighting, quarreling on the road back. Advar mechiraso, about the fact that I was sold. Lisvakeach zem zeh, to start debating and arguing with one another. Velomer al yadcha nimkar. One's going to point the finger of blame at the other and say, it's because of you he was sold. No, it's you. Atosi parta loshen haralav. You're the one who gave bad news, slandered him. V'garamta lanu l'sinoso, and caused us to hate him. Everyone's going to be pointing the finger of blame, saying, whose fault is it that this whole tragedy occurred? So he's telling them, Al tirgazu baderach, don't fight about this. I'm telling you guys, I'm mochel, I forgive. It was all the hand of God. I have no ill will. That's the pashut way. That's the plain way to understand this. However, Rashi did bring down the first way, which he didn't make up. That's Chazal. You'll find Gemaras and Midrashim say this. Is that that Yosef told them, Al tirgazu baderach, mean don't learn in-depth Torah while you're traveling home. That there's no getting away from that. Even though that's not pashut pshat, there is a strand in Chazal that learns that way. We're going to see something from Rav Sorotskin, because we love quoting Rav Sorotskin here. So here's Rav Sorotskin as a beautiful question and answer on that first pshat of Rashi. Let's see. Rav Sorotskin on page 4, Aznaim LaTorah. Al tirgazu baderach. The first pshat in Rashi is that Yosef tells him, don't get engaged in in-depth learning on the way. Al tisasku bidvar halacha. He's quoting the Gemara in Tanis. Don't get so involved in your learning; it'll put you at risk. Lama chashash yisasku b'pamazos b'divrei halacha. Why now? In other words, it's a weird thing. Yosef, you're sending them back to Eretz Yisrael. Now Yosef's last words of parting advice are, don't get too involved in your in-depth learning. It's going to be dangerous. You know, when Layla and I lived in Pennsylvania, there was a wonderful from medical student who lived, he was studying at Hershey, which was about a 20-minute drive from where we lived. But every Shabbos he would come spend in the community. He was a Balkari, he was a frum boy, he was learning. And we would see him, he was so studious. And he would walk to shul on Shabbos from the house where he stayed, studying his notes. He had flashcards he had made for himself from his medical school. And if it was drizzling, he had them in a Ziploc bag. And he would walk and study at the same time. And Layla would always say, I can't watch. I'm so nervous. He's going to trip on the sidewalk. I just can't watch. So it's kind of funny. I think of that every year when I see this Al Tirgazu B'derech, that Yosef's telling him, don't study in depth on your way home. It's not safe. So Rav Sorotskin wants to know, why now? Why is he telling him this sage piece of advice now? What is it about this particular moment in time that has Yosef nervous they're going to get engaged in deep Torah learning, and that's going to be a risk? So look at Rav Sorotskin. It's a beautiful suggestion. We can answer this based on what our sages tell us. Why 22 years ago did the brothers arrive at the conclusion that they were justified in either killing or at least selling, knocking Yosef off and getting him out of the picture? What made them feel so confident about that? So all the Chazal tells, the Sepharnos tells us straight out, but a lot of the Perush, a lot of the commentaries say this, is that they convened as a Beis Din, and they arrived at the conclusion that Yosef was a rodef. A rodef is a pursuer, someone who is trying to get another person killed. The law is you can knock him off. You can take a preemptive strike. This person poses a clear and imminent danger. You don't have to wait around to be a victim. And the brothers understood that Yosef was a rodef. Why? Because they saw he was coming back with all these scandalous and slanderous false stories about them to Yaakov. They figured he's trying to get Yaakov to disown us, to get us cursed, and not give us the blessings, because he wants the legacy to carry on just with him. And he's trying to get us excommunicated, cut off. We see how that goes. We see how that worked out for Yishmael in Avram's time. We see how that worked out for Esav in Yitzchak's time. And now here's Yosef. He's trying to do that to us. He's trying to get us kicked out of the picture. We can't allow this to happen. He is a rodef. He's a pursuer. Therefore, we are justified in knocking him off. Initially, they wanted to kill him. Then they said, no, we'll throw him in the pit and then we'll sell him. So that's what had initially gave him the justification. So Yosef knows this. He overheard the conversation when he's in the pit. He understands what's going on. So let's see Rav Sorotskin. Based on what our sages teach, the brothers had ruled that Yosef was a rodef, and therefore they were allowed to knock him off. But now, now that they saw that Hashem clearly saved Yosef from their plans 22 years ago, Hashem made certain that their plans did not come to fruition. And not just that, God saw to it that Yosef was made into a ruler over the entire land of Egypt. So now it's like all of a sudden it hits him like a ton of bricks. Then now they said, oh my God, 22 years ago, when we convened our Beis Din, we arrived at the wrong conclusion. So they say, you know what, while we're walking home, let's totally review the case. We have to go over the case from head to top, from top to bottom, from head to toe. Let's go over the case A to Z. Let's get it done. What did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? Let's totally reopen the case. It's a cold case. Let's reopen it. From afresh, let's reanalyze in depth this matter of halacha. What could be a greater halacha than having given someone the death sentence? Sheesh b'mikra in this case. Imasu az kedin. Were we proper? Were we not proper? V'imto, and if we goofed, if we made a mistake, b'mato, where did we go wrong? Umemela yitu aderech, and once they would be so engrossed and engaged in this discussion, sooner or later they would take a wrong turn and they would be at risk. Lefichach is hiram al zeh. That's why Yosef gives them this warning. So it's beautiful. It's not just out of the blue Yosef saying to them, oh, by the way, guys, I know you're such lamdanim, and on your way back, you're going to be learning Bava Mitzia, Bava Kama, one of the difficult mesachtas with one another. So don't get too engrossed in your learning because you'll miss the turnoff and you'll fall off a cliff. That's not what Yosef said. Yosef says, I've just revealed myself to you. And I know this, you were so confident in your decision 22 years ago and your whole ability to have focus and peace of mind. Everything, it all came crashing down because if you made this mistake 22 years ago, what other mistakes have you made? How did you make that mistake? And I know what's going to go on. Now you're going to start reanalyzing from fresh this whole thing. And what could be of greater depth than this, than to reopen that case? And that can be at risk. So now I'm telling you, Al Tirgazu B'derech, don't do it. Again, I'm mochel you. It's not important. Wherever you went wrong, you went wrong. Forget it. Hashem wanted this to happen. It was all part of God's plan. Forget about it. Don't reanalyze this. There's no point. That's what he's saying. I love this idea from Rav Sorotskin because it ties this all together. Otherwise, it just seems like a very, it's an odd thing that Yosef's throwing at him now. I love that. I want to share one more with you in Al Tirgazu B'derech. And this is a beautiful idea from the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim says, and we'll end with this, the Baal HaTurim has a wild, I don't want to say wild, but yeah, in a sense it's wild. The Baal HaTurim has a wild shadow. What does it mean, Al Tirgazu B'derech? He says, Al tismachu alai, do not depend on me, lomar, to say, Achinu gadol haaretz. Our brother is the most powerful ruler in the land of Egypt. Lasos avel l'shum adam. So now we can step on people's toes. Now that you know you've got a brother who's sitting on the throne, now all of a sudden you can start being rude to people. Now you can start stepping on Egyptians' toes because now you're not nervous anymore. And what's an example? Ela al tirgazu l'shum adam. Don't create a quarrel with any person. Al tirgazu b'derech doesn't mean don't quarrel amongst yourself. Al tirgazu b'derech means don't create a quarrel on your way back to Canaan. And what's an example? Leilech b'derech al sadeh zruah. Let's say you get to the road and all of a sudden you see right in front of you is a field that has been freshly plowed and planted. So you say, that's in my way. I want to cut right across it. But that's not fair. Some guy just planted all their crops. So now you'll say, but I don't care. I'm a brother of Yosef. I could get away with it. Yosef says, Al tirgazu b'derech. Don't create any quarrels on the way home by trying to take advantage of the fact that you got a brother in a high place. That's what he says. That's wild. What do we call that in Hebrew? There's a nickname. They call that protexia. That's one of the most commonly used slangs. I remember as a kid growing up, hearing about Israel. If you want to get by in Israel, you need protexia. What does that mean? That you do some name dropping. You got protection. You got someone's name in a high place. Here, I just Googled it. Here's something I found in a Jerusalem Post article. It's called Say What? The Complete Hebrew Slang Guide to Survival in Israel. They had a bunch of slangs that are just unique to modern Hebrew and life in Israel. And one of them is protexia. I never heard this. Some call it vitamin P for protexia, vitamin P. What does it mean? Utilizing connections to your advantage, similar to nepotism, cronyism. Vitamin P, the P stands for protexia, will give you power just as any other vitamin would. You always hate those who have it easy because of their protexia or vitamin P, but at the same time, you wish you had it too. Example, the new guy only got in because of his daddy. Only protexia can explain his recruitment. That's how it would be used. So here's the Baal HaTurim is saying, and to me this is a huge chiddush. This is so wild. Baal HaTurim is telling Yosef is telling the brothers rather, guys, I know I told you get back to Canaan and do it in a hurry. Now, I don't want you getting into fights with anyone on the way back. Why? Because since I told you there's no time to waste, you want to get back to Canaan as fast as possible. You might want to take shortcuts, get across people's fields who have just plowed them and planted, and they won't want you to, but you might just charge like a bull in a china shop to go through. And if anyone starts fighting with you, you'll say, watch it. I got a brother in high places. Yosef's my brother. That second in command in Egypt's my places. And that might try to make you think you could get away with it. Yosef's telling them, Al tirgazu b'derech. Don't do that. To me, that's a big chiddush for two reasons. Number one, it tells us even the Shiftei Ka, the tribes who were such tzaddikim, even them, they're subject to protexia. Protexia is something that could affect the nicest person, the greatest person, even a tzaddik. If you really want to get somewhere and there's an impediment, you start using protexia, even though that's totally not my midos. That's not my character traits. That's not the way I behave. If something's in my way and I have an opportunity to use protexia, it sounds like it's such a temptation to use it. And Yosef say, no, don't do it. And number two, that they would use protexia, even though a second ago, they felt terrible about the fact that they had just sold Yosef, and now Yosef revealed himself, even though they're feeling awful about the fact, their error in judgment and what they've done. But now that I found out I got a brother in the high places, now I'm willing to use that as protexia. Look how fast a human being, our minds work, that we could change channels like that. It's absolutely amazing. So this also comes, and it's linked to our first idea we were saying about Yosef. Yosef resisted temptation. Here also, I want you to resist temptation. There's no greater temptation than protexia. It just kicked in. I want you to resist that as well. I want you to resist that, and that's what he tells them. So with this, I'm going to wish everyone a good day. I'm going to stop the recording.